Episode 11 is with a guy called Danny Kennedy. He's a mindset coach, he's a personal trainer and fitness instructor, and he's an entrepreneur that has now grown his own podcast to over 7 million downloads. Our conversation today is something where if you are looking for the best hacks, the best ways, or the best methods to be able to optimize your mindset so that you can grow into the person you want to be, this is the conversation for you to listen to. So anyways, let's get to the show. You know, it's one of those ones where, like I said, you've done a bunch of podcasts since about 2016, haven't you? Your journey started, and you've done 7 million downloads, and you've done the whole work. And it's for someone like you to come into a podcast, it's very different to someone coming on for the first time. So I always find that game is like everyone's nervous to start, and then the shoulders are like loosened up. But
it's funny though, like as you said, I've done over 500 episodes, but that still makes me uncomfortable because it's just something that I don't do. It's not like, it's just something that I don't do. It's definitely like I would say I do a lot of work on like limiting beliefs and stuff at the moment. And I've always been like super awkward around anything to do with like acting or like dancing and stuff like that. Like, you could get me as pissed as possible and I still wouldn't dance. Like I just, for whatever it is, whatever reason, it's a massive, like, I guess you could say insecurity of mine. I just can't do it. But anyway, I'm glad we got it out of the way.
Well, it's interesting, like you've interviewed some of the best names in the business. You've done people that I'd only inspire to get on. So like John DeMartini, Kerwin Ray, Peter Crone, like some of the best mindset coaches out there. And you speak about still having limiting beliefs. I guess, what are some of the things that you sort of learnt from them over, your duration of conversations that you've had that, maybe you could look at implementing to help you with like a game like that?
Well, I think in terms of the lessons, one of the first things I could say is that regardless of like how well people on the outside look like they've got their shit together, it's usually not the case in a certain area of their life. That's one thing I've noticed. Like you look at successful people or people who are doing really well in a certain area, and a very common theme, and obviously this is something that most of these guests that I've spoken with work on regularly, and are probably better at it than most people, but to get to like a certain level of success, I feel like there's always like, and I'm a big believer in playing into your strengths, and within business, delegating the things that you're probably not as good at. But it's like when someone puts so much time and effort into a certain lane of their life, the other areas kind of slip a little bit. And so Kerwin Ray was a really good example. Like he obviously shared his story and got extremely vulnerable about the periods of his life where he was seeing huge success in business in all different areas of life. But then there was also this part, like his kind of like shadow, or this part of his life where he was struggling like immensely, and whether that was due to limiting beliefs, past experiences, neglecting or suppressing certain parts of his life, and just kind of like filling it in with distractions or with other areas that felt really good. That all plays a bit of a part in it. But in terms of limiting beliefs, I feel your biggest superpower is vulnerability. I think vulnerability is a tool that so many people can use to not only better themselves, but to be able to bring up those around them as well, and give power to others. I only had this conversation yesterday with a mentoring client of mine who's just gone through like a really rough period like in his life, and part of that was a business failure, along with just some personal struggles, and he's trying to rebuild at the moment. And part of his like limiting beliefs or his insecurities at the moment is around, people finding out about the business failure, or what are people saying about, me going from being at the top of the top to now just the bottom of the bottom. And he has like this insecurity and just feels embarrassed about the whole situation. And as I said, vulnerability being such a superpower that it is, I suggested to him, I'm like, hey, like this thing can either hold you back for the next however long, 5, 10, maybe the rest of your life if you let it, or you can kind of really face that adversity, the awkwardness, the resistance and the discomfort, and put all of your struggles out into the world to the people that you're worried about their opinions and whether or not people find out. And in this case, it was like, walk up to the people that you're purposely ignoring in public because you're embarrassed about what happened, and just go and have a conversation with them. Record a video and put it on your big social media and run through all the mistakes that you made, the low points that you had, the lessons you took away from it, and where you look to go next. And that will give other people power as well. I think when you lean into your vulnerabilities and your insecurities and shed light on them, that firstly, they're not as scary as like what you think they are. And I believe that with everything. I think when there's discomfort or resistance, it's, I refer to it with my clients as a ticket for growth. And so every time there is resistance, it's like, I can either look at this and let this be the thing that holds me back from potentially living my best life, or I can look at that as a ticket for growth and lean into the discomfort, the resistance, and see what's on the other side of it. Because I genuinely believe, whether it's a self-limiting belief, a vulnerability, or any resistance that we have, it's the same as going to the gym. If you and I go to the gym and we do bicep curls with the same weight, same reps, same exercise every week, in a short period of time, we're not going to see any more growth or any more added strength. It's only when we add more resistance by adding weight, reps, sets, or difficulty to provide an uncomfortable stimulus to the muscle that it's going to grow or get stronger. And it's exactly the same with life. It's like, if I have this area of resistance in my life or discomfort, it's a sign for me to lean into that and see what's on the other side of it. So hopefully that kind of answers your question, but that's kind of like how I look at these limiting beliefs, because everyone has them. It's like, it's not, we don't wake up one day and just be like, fuck, I've got this limiting belief. It's like a good habit that takes time and consistency of a repeated action or thought or process that leads to a subconscious habit. It's the same as a limiting belief. It's either, past experiences or conditioning from your environment, parents, friends, partner, whatever it is, or repeated action or thought over time that leads to this outcome. And so when you realize that, it also allows you to realize, well, I can change this belief. I can identify it, peel back the layers a bit, become really self-aware of what it is, and change it and replace it with a belief that is going to serve me and is in alignment with what I want as part of my life, or the areas that I need to improve on. And so, again, very long answer to your question. I think the thing I took away from most of these bigger guests, or the guests that's touched on this type of stuff, is realistically this self-awareness around what they actually are. Because most people will go through life with no fucking idea what their limiting beliefs are, and they'll just the limiting beliefs will run their life.
It's so fucked, isn't it? That's how people will operate. I mean, one of the guys we spoke about before, John D. Martini, he says a quote that's like, growth happens when you're on the border of challenge and support. Mm-hmm. And you need to have a bit of both in order to be able to put yourself in positions where you can grow, right? I guess someone like yourself that speaks articulately around mindset and health and fitness, I mean, that's your whole podcast, right? When did this, I guess, mindset growth sort of avenue start for you? And what was some advice that you received maybe younger on in life that maybe you still hold today?
It didn't happen until a little later. I mean, when I say later, like I've only just turned 30, but it was like, I guess the best way to put it is that from a very early age, I relied on hard work and taking action to get further in life. And once growing up, I was pretty anxious, like always felt like I needed to try and fit in. Was very much a people pleaser. Was an athlete, basketball and footballer, but by far never the most skilled player. And so I just found that like my superpower at the time was, I'm going to work harder than everyone else. And that then translated into everything. Like once I started my business, the same thing happened and I applied that there. But with that, it was very much so like, suppress any of the bad, negative feelings or the uncomfortable feelings or parts of life, and fill it with the distraction of working hard or putting time into business, putting time into my physique and training, putting time into getting better at my sport or whatever. And so when I started to see results and see changes in my body or success with sport, it was like it reaffirmed that, all right, just keep working harder, consistent. And you'll keep going further. But then it got to, and so in a way, I feel like from a mindset perspective, like that period, although it probably wasn't ideal in a way, it also has been one of the biggest building blocks to why I feel like I've seen success in certain areas of life now. Is because I learned that like, I don't need anyone to come and try and motivate me to do what I need to do. I don't need to be told to be disciplined. It's like, I know that if I put in the effort and I put in the work, like I'm not waiting for anyone else to come and do shit for me. It's like, I know that if I'm consistent, disciplined and put in the effort, then a lot of the time, whether or not I do or don't see a result in business, sport, whatever it is, it's on me completely. But in saying all that, like I got to, how old would I have been? Maybe 22, 23, maybe, yeah, around then, maybe 22. And I was just anxious. Like I wasn't that happy. I was getting towards the back end, I guess you could say, of like a relationship as well. And that's nothing against the partner I was with at the time. It was more so just like I'd suppressed any negative feeling. I was burning the candle at both ends, and I was doing nothing for my mindset. It was all physical, and just go. And so then I started, partying a bit more and all the rest of it. And it was just burning the candle at both ends, as you could say. And so I got to this point where I was just like extremely anxious, not that happy. And I tried meditation for the first time. And even to this day, like I don't necessarily sit around and sit still for too long. So now I've used tools and whatnot to feel that sense of peace and abundance and to just be present and kind of go with the flow a little more sometimes, I guess you could say. But up until then, that had never been the case. Like I had no like inner peace whatsoever, none. And so, I started meditating. I tried Headspace for the first time. I think I did like a 6-minute meditation. And in that first meditation I genuinely felt this sense of peace. Like it felt really nice. It was like just a moment, like, and they say, like with meditation, sometimes all you need is just that one moment of where you lose track of space and time or whatever it is, and you just have that sense of peace, and that can be enough to keep coming back. It's like playing golf. You fucking hit one good shot, you play 18 holes, play like absolute dog shit all day, hit one good shot, and you'll be like, I'm pretty good at golf, I'm coming back.
And I'm going to come back and play.
And so, had that meditation. And I also was introduced to a book by Robin Sharma called The Greatness Guide. And that was the first book realistically that I chose to read. I'd never read, like I hated reading in school and stuff, but reading that book, there was just like this, it sparked like this fire inside of me. It was like a feeling that I hadn't had before, starting to just understand parts of personal development and mindset. And I remember just reading it, like I got through it in like a day, and I just felt so lit up reading it because it was just stuff that I'd never really put thought to or been introduced to before. And so that kind of started my journey, I guess you could say, with personal development. And from there, it's just like anything else. It was like taking action on the meditation side of things, and then being curious about, all right, what else is there? And then trying, I went to a Wim Hof workshop, started to understand breath work and ice baths and cold water therapy and all the rest of it. And I just kept gradually leaning into like, what's next? Like, how can I continue to evolve this? And I guess that's kind of also using the mindset I told you about before. It was like, whenever I do something, I typically try and go flat out with whatever that is. And so I'd set the goal to meditate every day into 2017. And by doing that, when I look back at it now, it ended up just being like anything else. It ended up just being like a tangible goal of just like, I need to tick this off. So it didn't really serve its purpose in terms of meditation, but it did then introduce me to learning more about meditation and being introduced to guys like Dr. Joe Dispenza, trying longer meditations. As I said, going to a Wim Hof workshop and learning breath work. And then from there, it just kept evolving and building momentum, like starting to hire mentors, understanding, some of the deeper level stuff, I guess you could say, around like the law of vibration and law of attraction and self-limiting beliefs, and just understanding what the inner work actually was. And so, there was nothing really, I wouldn't say there was anything that anyone said to me or was like a specific line in a book. It was more so the feeling. It was a feeling that I hadn't had before of like just excitement. And I think for most people who go down the path of personal development or are passionate about anything, the feeling I'm talking about. It's like, you could be reading a book, you could be listening to a podcast, you could be whatever. And you just have this feeling where it's just like, it's a really high frequency, like lights a fire inside of you type of thing, where you're just like, I'm now very curious about going deeper into this. And so that was the moment where I was like, all right, let's strap in and see how we go. And so over that next, however long of a period that was, over the next kind of 5 years, I just gradually progressed into deeper and deeper work on myself, and started seeing the changes and the benefits of what it was doing for me, but also like the outcome it was leading to in my life as well. And now I guess it's at the point where like I've been doing it for a long enough period of time and feel like I have a good enough understanding where I was naturally just sharing it with friends and clients and seeing that little firelight inside of them as well. And so I was like, I want to be able to have this impact on more people. And I've always kind of made the effort to never share or teach, not try and teach anything that I haven't experienced myself. And so a lot of the stuff I do, like with my business, whatever, is very much just sharing my own experiences and documenting it. And when I feel like I can add value to someone, I'll do it. And so again, there's way too long of an answer to a pretty simple question, but it was more so a feeling, not necessarily like a piece of advice.
That's good, but firstly, I appreciate the long answers because you're not having to do anything calculated. It's literally just you saying how you feel, right? And I resonate with reading books because I reckon school fucked me up. I had like Macbeth, I had like a Lord of the Flies, like
To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh mate, I just used to see if there was a movie and I'd try to watch it, right? I hated
Find
reading.
a summary online.
I hated it, and it was there was a book called The 5 a.m. Club that was the first book that I read.
Robin Sharma.
That I literally read it and I was like lit up. And when you were talking about that, I was smiling because I'm like, that's actually how I felt when I read the book that I liked. So, it's interesting for guys or girls that are listening, that maybe finish school and go, oh, fuck, I hate reading. There's Audible, there's all these other things. I still feel like a paper handbook you can write in, read properly is a great tool if you get a good book.
Mm-hmm.
Being a hard worker, that's something when you play sport, when you start your own business, that comes for granted. Those type of people generally are hard workers, but it doesn't come from nowhere. There's normally someone in your life that you look at and you go, fuck, they worked hard. Who was that for you and what did they do?
Mum and dad have always worked their absolute arse off. They still do today. I guess that was probably... They have obviously had a huge positive impact on me, and I am extremely grateful for both of them. I was very, very, very fortunate to have an awesome childhood, and mum and dad were and still are amazing and very supportive. But they always worked really hard, and it wasn't necessarily like, I think within sport too, like growing up playing sport, I was obviously witnessed a lot of other kids my age who were getting kind of pushed by their parents to work hard or to be good at their sport or kind of pushed into the sport. That was never really the case for me. So I've thought about this a little bit a number of times. I don't really know because obviously, as I said, I had really good role models, but there was never anyone going like, you have to fucking put in all this work if you want to be good. You have to do this, that, and the other. It was more so just, I think it was just me. Again, I don't know whether it was actually wanting to be good at the sport or wanting to fit in and be part of something and prove that I was worthy of respect or whatever it may have been, or just being liked. I don't know. Back then, it was, as I said, it was very much people-pleasing energy from my side. But I just saw the fact that when I did work hard, I got better at things. And to me, I probably paired like, all right, if I'm good at sport, I'll have more respect, or I'll be liked, or whatever it was. And so that kind of just drove me to be like, all right, well, fuck, I don't want to feel like shit, or I don't want to feel like I don't fit in, or I want respect. So I'm like, I am going to just work as hard as I can and work harder than everyone else to make sure that I get good at whatever it was I was doing, whether it was in the gym, with football, basketball, whatever. Like, I want to get fucking good to get respect and to do well. And I think like that was a big part of it too. Like, I just wanted to be successful in whatever I did. But yeah, it wasn't anyone that pushed me into it, or there wasn't necessarily one person in particular that I kind of like based my life off as such. I just started kind of, I guess, studying up on people who were successful and athletes and whatever it may be, and just knew that I just had to work hard.
Your internal drive to work hard is pretty fascinating because it's obviously come from an early age, and you see a lot of kids that are 12, 13, 14 that have that mindset that want to try to play professional sport, right? I was the same. I wanted to play professional cricket, right? Or professional footy, one of the two. And you have to, you start delving, like back then the internet was a little bit different, right?
Yeah.
So you sort of law of attraction and all that stuff wasn't quite out there, but you occasionally heard of, hey, there was like a saying, what, if you don't believe you can do it, you'll never achieve it, or something along those lines. So you're always telling yourself that. At what stage did you think, yep, I've got this, or no, I haven't got this for your sporting career? Because when you're a hard worker and you put so much fucking time and effort into it, there comes like a little breaking point or a sticking point for some people, and that can make them choose one career path or another.
It's an interesting one with perspective. It's very different than what it felt, obviously, in the actual moment. But at the time, to be honest, I've mentioned this on podcasts before, like throughout my basketball career as a junior, I was very fortunate to play at like a high level. But in that high level, I was always at the bottom of that high level. As in, like, I was always cut from like state teams, not getting as many minutes in like the good team of whatever I was playing with, whether it be in Big V or whatever it may have been. Like, I was always the one. And growing up in Horsham, we were so lucky. We had so many good basketballers. Like, I was so fortunate that I got to train and play with like some unbelievable players who, you know, some have been to the NBA, some have gone to college, a lot of them are playing in the NBL now. And so it was awesome from a sense of like, I'm always against guys who are fucking awesome. So this is going to make me good. But then from my own self-worth, it made me feel like shit most of the time, because like I was always at the bottom end of that group. And so that again was part of the reason why I just worked so hard, because I wanted to get better. So I didn't have to have that feeling. I guess when I look back at my basketball career, it was always a bit of a shit feeling. Like when I think about it now, it was like almost like I was working hard and wanted to be successful to prove to myself or to others that I wasn't just going to give up because I was at the bottom end, if that makes sense. And so I enjoyed footy more, to be honest. And naturally, I feel like I was much better at footy. But because I'd made my mind up that, like, no, fuck, I'm going to be good at basketball. And at the same time, I probably wrapped my identity around that a bit as well. I leaned towards basketball. Any opportunity it came to like either path, like whether there was a weekend where I either had footy or there was something that I needed to do for basketball and I couldn't do both, I would choose basketball. And it got towards the end of year 12 and I was like, all right, finally I've had enough. Like, I'm going to focus on footy for a year, which was a massive decision for me to make, like personally. And I was just going to can basketball for a year, which like was a massive shock to like my parents and all the rest of it. But that was obviously super supportive of it. And then within like a week, I got offered a spot in the Australian College of Basketball down here with like some really reputable high level coaches. And it was going to be like a 2-year thing where it was basically full-time training, a bit of study as well, and moved to Melbourne like straight after year 12. So I had no intention of leaving. I had no intention of moving to Melbourne, firstly. I'd got accepted into uni in Geelong. So if anything, I was going to move there. But I'd already just made the decision to take a year off basketball and focus on footy and just work back in Horsham. But then that all changed like straight away. And so then within 2 weeks, I was living in Melbourne. And so it was weird. It had like this little peak and then a trough and then a peak. It was like, all right, fuck basketball, going to focus on footy. Then it was like, actually, no, we'll go back to basketball. And so throughout that 2 years here, I developed the most that I developed, obviously, up until that point. Like, I felt like I was in a really good place, but still, there was still a massive part of me that knew there was parts of like my game or whatever that were missing to play at the highest level. Like, I had confidence and belief that I could do it, but if I was going to get to the highest level, it would be like, I'd be lucky to get to the highest level. And I needed to be exceptionally good at certain things to have that opportunity. And so in my mind, I was still like, I'm going to become a professional basketballer. But at the same time, like with perspective, when I look back at it, it was like I was just hanging on to something. Like the opportunity I had was incredible. And don't get me wrong, like as I said, I developed a lot. But it was still, if I look at it now, as I said, I would have been lucky to make it, like extremely lucky if I got an opportunity to play at like the highest level after that 2 years. But in it, I obviously was putting everything into it. And as I said, I kind of tied my identity to it then. So that was like what I felt like I needed to do. And it was like too late to fucking pull the pin on that. It's like, you're fucking in it now, so let's go. But then, I had an ankle reconstruction at the end of 2013, and that gave me a fair bit of time away from basketball, like forced time away from basketball. And that's when I realized like there's more to life than basketball, and I actually didn't miss it at all. And I initially did, obviously, but after a few months, I was like, I now can really focus on training in the gym, which I was obsessed with. Like, in hindsight, I was way more interested in the fitness and the gym side of being an athlete than I was the actual sport, and because that was my passion, and so that allowed me to start my business and all the rest of it. And so at that moment, I was like, did I even love it as much as what I thought I did, or did I just do this because I felt like I had to prove to myself that I could do it? And that's probably what it was, more so than anything. So probably more of an ego thing. And so at that point, I was like, all right, catch you later. I didn't.
Dude, resonates.
Never went back to it.
It resonates with me so much. Like, I retired from cricket after 15 years of giving it a crack, and I had surgery on my foot as well, right? And I couldn't play for a bit. I had the summer off. It was the first summer off since I was 15 years old playing senior cricket, and I almost didn't miss it. And I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I spent every Saturday in the field for 10 hours, and then I'm like, really? I did that to myself?
Yeah.
Why? And I'm really interested when you say wrap your identity around being a basketballer. I can resonate with the cricket stuff, but you hear a lot of people talk about no plan B, only plan A. That's the only way you're going to succeed. I guess now that you're older, wiser, more mature, you've worked and spoken to a lot of people that are professional with mindset. Do you think that's a healthy way for a young man or woman to go about trying to achieve being a sports man or woman?
Short answer, no. I'm fortunate now that I get to do mindset coaching with a bunch of athletes. And so I've had not only experience myself, but now I'm kind of getting to watch that play out with people who are professional athletes now and help them through that experience as well, on a much bigger level, obviously, in comparison to where I was. But the thing is, I think, as I just said, you tie your identity to it. So let's say an AFL athlete been playing football their whole junior career. They're now an AFL athlete. They're getting towards their 30s. All they've ever known is football. And that's what people know them for. They've built their whole life and success around football. And so on one hand, you think, of course, you look at the top level players in any given sport. Obviously, they are fixated on being the best in terms of like they are dedicated to their craft. And there's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, you need to be putting thought to life outside of that sport, because you cannot play forever. And so you see it happen all the time with professional athletes. When they finally finish their career, they're lost. Like, they could have been the best player in the given sport that they've got, and they finish their career and they've just got no idea what to do with life. Like, there's so many, their whole life's been structured and regimented, so they've never had to do anything for themselves. They don't actually have any real qualifications or anything outside of the sport. So career-wise, it's like, unless they get an opportunity in media or whatever, there's not that much that they don't even know what to do. And at the same time, you look at the average lifespan of a professional athlete, it's actually quite short for the majority of people, unless you're an absolute freak. And so if it does get cut short, then what else is there? But the main part of that is, I look at the thing that I've really taken away from it is that even if you're an exceptional footballer, basketballer, soccer player, cricket player, whatever, it's not who you are, it's something that you do. Like LeBron James, will go down as one of the best players of all time. I still think MJ's better.
Yeah.
But he is not him as a person, he's not a basketballer. He's a human being who plays basketball and is obviously exceptionally fucking good at it.
Yeah.
But he still has so many qualities to him as a person that makes him who he is without basketball. And so you've got to look at that yourself as well. And so one of the guys I'm working with at the moment in this last year or two has seen such a transition in that. And I think the thing that people worry about is that, like, all right, if I have not so much a plan B, but if I put thought and effort into things outside of this thing I'm dedicated to, does that make me less dedicated or disciplined to being the best? And it doesn't. Because this athlete that I'm talking about at the moment, like the last year or two, he's probably had the best 2 seasons he's had in the last 10 years, because he's just happy and enjoying what he's doing instead of being fixated on every little detail and consumed and trying to force this outcome. But at the same time, as he gets towards the end of his career, he's cool with whatever happens. Like, he's not now stressed about signing a new contract because, fuck, if I don't get a contract, I don't know what I'm going to do. It's like he enjoys life outside of sport, which then makes him much better at the actual sport itself, but at the same time has a full self-awareness of who he is as a person, so that if it was taken away from him, he would be okay. He would be completely fine. He would be the exact same person as he is now, and he would still be as happy. There'd be obviously a big chunk gone from his life that he's had for so long, but he wouldn't be lost. And so I think that's what people struggle with a lot, whether it's an athlete, whether it's the job you're in, whether it's the relationship you're in. Yes, 100%. It's like when you tie too much, you rely too much on something or someone giving you your identity and your happiness, you're in strife. Because if it gets taken away, and if you're attached to this thing, if and when that thing goes, what do you have left? And you're just a shell of yourself because you've relied on it for so long. And so a lot of the work that I do now with any of the mentoring clients I work with is like, how can we get to the point where you don't need anything, anyone, anywhere in order to feel at the highest frequency and feel the best you've ever felt in your life, just with you alone, like whether it be through meditation, whether it be through becoming self-aware of what values you want to live by, the feelings and the emotions you want to have each day. When you can get to that point, you're sweet, because then all the other shit that you do, you're doing it because you want to, or it feels amplified in terms of how much fulfillment and happiness you get from it, because you're not doing it to feel happy. You're not doing it to fill a certain void or to feel confident or whatever it is. And you see it with like even money. Money's a big one. Circumstantial power, I think, is what Deepak referred to it as. Deepak Chopra, in his book, 7 Spiritual Laws of Success. It's one of my favorite books. He talks about wealthy people, like the amount of wealthy people or rich people, because you probably wouldn't even call them wealthy if they've got this mindset. It's like rich people who only feel confident, have self-worth, have power, have fulfillment, happiness, all the rest of it because of the money. But when the money's taken away, to them, they're nobody anymore. Whereas when you see someone who's truly wealthy, the reason they have wealth is because they focus on who they are as a person first, which the money and the wealth is a byproduct of them being that version of themselves and the frequency they're carrying within themselves. And they're not tying their self-worth or their identity to a thing that can be taken away. Anytime your identity or self-worth is tied to something that can be taken away, you're putting yourself in a very vulnerable and shit position, because, as I said, if and when it does get taken away, you're now in a really fucking hard place to get out of.
You spoke about, having anxiousness, right? Mm-hmm. And then you also loved basketball, and that was something that ended for you. And you now start a completely different phase in life. What did anxiousness feel like for you back then? Because there's a lot of people that will listen, they're listening to you now, they go, fuck, this guy's a wealth of knowledge. And they've got no idea how hard it may have been for you to get to this point. So if you could, articulate it in the best possible way for someone listening, in case they're also feeling anxious, mm-hmm. Maybe they've got a goal they want to achieve, don't want to say it out loud, or, it might be like your client that is afraid to, talk about their failures and being vulnerable. What did that emotion and feeling feel like for you? And then once you explain that, maybe explain how you navigated through it.
I guess it felt quite crippling in a sense. Like, and I mean, there was, you also then end up, you kind of touched on it before. It's like the cliche saying of whether or not you believe you can or you believe you can't, either way you're right. It's like what you focus on is what you'll experience more of. And so I see this all the time with people who feel like they're the victim all the time, or they're people who always lean towards negativity or talk and think about shit they don't want to happen. It's like, that's where you're spending your focus and your time. That is the experience that you're going to experience of life. Very much the same as if you are focused on where you want to go, or the feelings you do want to feel, or focus on positivity, like you will experience that. And so in that moment, because I was so like anxious and I don't know if depressed, but like anxious for sure, a lot of my thoughts would always be around like, what if this happens? Or like, I don't want this to happen. Or what if this person thinks this? And so all of my thoughts were around future events that hadn't happened yet probably wouldn't happen. And even if they did that, I have no control over them happening anyway. And so that's what a lot of my anxiety was around. Like Peter Crone talked about it on the episode that I did with him. It's like psychological time. It's like you feel a sense of depression or frustration and anger when you are living psychologically in the past. And when you're psychologically living in the future, that hasn't happened yet, and you don't know if it will happen, that's what creates anxiety and stress all of the time. And so that's where I was spending all my fucking psychological time. It's just in this future that hadn't happened yet, and I didn't even know if it would. And so, yeah, it kind of just held me back. The biggest thing it did was stop me from being authentic to myself. And so it was the most liberating feeling when I finally just said, fuck it. I don't care. I don't care what anyone thinks. I don't want to focus my time and energy on pleasing anyone now. It's like, I want to do what feels authentic to me and what I genuinely just enjoy, and just like let go all the fucking, let all the barriers down and just be myself. And by going through that process, you also realize that you had created all those issues for yourself a lot of the time. Because then when you're like, oh, no one actually gives a fuck, or like no one's putting their time and energy towards me, like, or this big thing that I thought was going to happen didn't happen, all this type of stuff. And you have that sense of realization where you're like, oh, well, I created all this for myself in a sense. And obviously there's things that happen in life that create stress, anxiety, and all the rest of it that is out of your control. But a lot of the time it's just how you perceive things. And so it's easier said than done. But it's like, when you remove judgment on outcomes and people as well, which is something different, I guess, but when you remove judgment towards outcomes and you don't label them as good or bad, and you don't try and figure out what's going to happen in the future because you don't know, and you just genuinely stay as present as possible and just focus on what's within your control, you realize there's not much to stress and feel anxious about. And so, but through that experience, I think the thing that I found, like the hardest part for me, I guess, was just always having to be distracted. Like, particularly for sleep. Like for sleep at like that period where I probably felt the worst was like, there was a period where even though I was still anxious, I could go to sleep like straight away because I'd just be fucking exhausted because of all the shit we talked about, like just filling my days with as much as possible. But probably when I was still in school, like I just hated nighttime.
You hated nighttime?
Yeah. Because I was like, I just don't think I'm not going to be able to, like, the thought of like going to sleep. And so come to think of it, like there's still something I do today, but I do enjoy this and it helps me sleep, which is why I do it. But it probably all stemmed from what I used to do. Like I would just listen to shit. Like I would put stuff on, like, and for me, it's actually, yeah, I mean, I still do this to this day, and I don't do this now because of anxiety. I do this because I think it's just a pattern and a habit now, and I enjoy it. But I would listen to stand-up comedy
before bed,
while I'm sleeping, while I'm trying to go to sleep, and it's still something I do today. I can sleep without it. Sometimes I'll listen to binaural beats, or sometimes I'll just go to sleep. But it just became something that became a pattern and a habit, and it's something that I still do. Like I would listen to, at that time though, I would listen to it because I was like, I want to be like, I want to be distracted by something positive and funny, to not drift across to like anxiety and like thinking about this, that, and the other. And so yeah, I just fucking hated nighttime.
It's funny. It's so funny you said that. Like, girl I was dating, she used to listen to crime podcasts before going to sleep. Obviously, we're not dating anymore.
Yeah, psychopath.
I was like, what the fuck? But it is something where you're like, trying to wind down and reduce that. My thing, I know when I was trying to navigate all my thoughts, was I used to write down all the things that I was worried about in a book before I went to bed. And I used to cross out all the things I couldn't control.
I love that.
And then I would write down what I could control. And it was amazing. I'd have like 30 things that I was like worried about. And then 28 of them I couldn't control. And then the 2 were like, get up and do this and make sure you send off that email.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, fuck, thank God.
I think mine also came from like even younger. Like just thinking about it now is like when I was really young, I reckon I had like I had OCD for sure. Like not diagnosed, but like genuine OCD, like just with certain things, like superstitious. Is that what it is? Superstitious, that's the word?
Yeah.
Superstitious with certain things but OCD with it, like real fucking bad. Even like, I remember when I was younger, like really young, I had this thing where I would like, with light switches, I would fucking...
Me too.
I would literally be like, I would switch the light off, touch the bottom of it, like make sure it was off over and over and over and over and over again. And I remember one night, like this is when I was really young, so this is so bizarre. I was really young, and I reckon mum and dad went out one night, and so we had like a babysitter or whatever. And I think like the whole time they were out, I was like doing that to like all the fucking PowerPoints in the house, like an absolute nutcase, like for the whole time they were out. But I also used to just have like my brain, I don't know why it was wired this way. Like I always just used to gravitate towards bad shit happening, like worrying about shit that would happen, to the point where like when I was really young, I would hear like a siren and be like, have mum and dad had a car crash? Like I'd be in my house with my grandma or something, hear a siren and be like in tears to my grandma going like, what if they've died in a car accident? And it's just so bizarre like that. And I think obviously that probably then led to a lot of anxiety like later on. That was probably the start of it. But it was just, yeah, like just always worrying about shit.
I reckon that's pretty common. That was definitely me. Dad was a cab driver, and so sometimes at night you'd be sleeping because he used to do like a hungry shift. Used to go out at night and work. And back then it's not like you do Uber ratings, right? It's like you go out there and people are doing runners and all that type of shit, right? And you hear a siren go or something, and it would just trigger a thought.
Yep.
And then that thought would evoke an emotion. And lots to be said around understanding that, whether you're literally experiencing the actual thing or the thoughts provoking the emotion, it's still going to have the same effect on your body.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's well documented now. One of the things that I guess you've obviously had to work through as a kid is being able to navigate those thoughts and navigate those anxiousness, which is common, which is very normal. Were there some tools that you utilized besides the meditation and the listening to something before you go to bed that you also thought that was valuable in terms of, I guess, transitioning now from not just anxious, but like really like positive thoughts?
There's a few things. The first thing you just said before about, you can have like this thought, which then if it triggers an emotion and you connect it together, like Joe Dispenza talks about, like when you have a thought and an emotion that go together, it wires together. Like it creates a
neural pathway.
A potential, a neural pathway, right? So what I've learnt though, and this is something that I spend a lot of time on now, is that we can use that to our advantage in a positive sense. And so I know you said outside of meditation, but meditation is one that I use a lot to try and do that. So it's like a conversation I have with people is that, okay, if we're sitting down, we're getting really intentional about, like, intentions is one of the answers to this question, right? It's like getting intentional about outcomes that I really want, that don't have to make sense, doesn't have to make logical sense, doesn't have to be, it's removing the barriers of the past conditioning and the limiting beliefs and all the rest of it, and just literally figuring out, in an ideal perfect world, what outcome would I like in all different areas of life. And it's really specific. But with this intention, the thing that I found really powerful is most people look at themselves here, outcome here. And firstly, the only reason we typically want anything is because of how we think we'll feel when we get it. And so what we're saying from day one is that I don't have what I need to feel a certain way. And I'm also a big believer in what you focus on is what you experience more of. And so in this scenario, we're focused on lack because we're saying we don't have what we want or need to get to this thing. At the same time, our brain then goes to like all the shit we've got to do to get there, what might happen, how we're going to do it. We don't know how, so we just kind of give up on it, blah, blah, blah. But what's really powerful is looking at, okay, this outcome here, whether it's, getting in great physical shape, whether it's a materialistic item, whether it's a partner, a job, whatever. If I already had that, what are the emotions attached to that? Like, what are the emotions that are attached to this outcome? And once you know what those emotions are, you then go, okay, well, if I was already there, what would my life look like? Like, what would my habits be like? What would my people I surround myself look like? What thoughts would I be trying to consume myself with? What content would I be consuming? Like all of this stuff. And the goal is to be that person now. Obviously, that requires like a lot of belief because nothing changes straight away. And so one of my mentors, I always fuck this saying up, but you'll get the gist of what I'm trying to say. Belief is kind of like trust without evidence. And so at the beginning, there is no evidence that you should feel that way because nothing's changed. But if we can be that person and feel those emotions now, in whatever way we do that, through meditation, intention, just genuinely trying to be that person now, there's now a very good reason as to why we would attract that outcome. Because instead of waiting until we get the outcome to become that person, we're being that person now. And so we're on the same frequency as that person now as well. And so now it becomes a matter of when, not a matter of if the outcome happens. As long as we continue to maintain that frequency and that idea of what that person would look like. And so fitness is a good example. Someone overweight wants to lose a heap of fat, get in great shape. They sign up to a 12-week program. Day one, they're already thinking about fucking finishing at the end of it, and they can't wait till the end of it. They're following an exercise plan, a diet, and they're doing the things to get the result. But they're not becoming the person that would have that result. And so they miss a week, they get injured, they get sick or whatever. They're thinking, fuck, I've cooked it. Like, I've got to start again, or I've failed, or I'm not going to get this result. And they get to the end of it and they haven't changed. Even if they get the result, they haven't changed as a person. They've just got this result because they did the things. Whereas from day one, if you go, okay, well, if I was already in the best shape of my life, what would my life look like? I would probably train regularly. I would be intentional about my food. I would prioritize sleep. I'd probably surround myself with people who are healthy and live that lifestyle. All this, that, and the other. They can start doing that today. And so in time, it would make sense for them to get that result because they've already become that person, if that makes any sense. And so if they miss a day, if someone's in great shape and they miss a day or a week of training, they don't go, fuck, I'm going to have to start again. It's just like, oh, I'll train next week when I feel better, or I'll go to training tomorrow because I need a day of rest today, and nothing changes. But a big tool that I found really helpful, because what you were talking about before in terms of letting a thought lead to an emotion, it's being the victim of your thoughts. And so the idea is that you want to become the observer of your thoughts.
Yes.
And so the analogy that I found really helpful is like, if I'm the CEO of this company and I've got a job up for grabs, right? I might have 20 applicants for this job. I have to observe and listen to the 20 applicants that apply. I can't just be like, no, I don't want to listen to you. Like, I have to sit and listen and interview each and every single one of these applicants. But I'm only going to choose one for the job. I'm not going to choose all 20 of them. I still observed all of them, but I only chose one because they were the right one for the job. And they fit the criteria, and that's the one that I chose because that's the one that I want to be in my company and surround myself with. But I did have to observe all the other 19. It's very similar with your thoughts. You don't have to believe every thought. You don't have to hire every thought that comes up. You can observe them, and you are intentional about the thoughts that you want to put your time and energy towards. Because if you just believe every thought, like, I don't know the exact stats, but it's something like tens of thousands of thoughts we have per day, and 80+% of those are subconscious. And so if you've got, a lot of negativity going on subconsciously, if you believe in every one of these thoughts, it would make sense that your life sucks and your experience of life is shit because you're believing every single thought. And as you said, once you start believing your thoughts, you have an emotional response to these thoughts, it's game over. You're now changing your chemistry and all this whatnot. And every time you have one of these thoughts, you're experiencing this thing. It's like, as you said, you could have someone this is a different example, but you could have someone who's been in a car crash 10 years ago, be sitting in a cafe drinking a latte, and someone screeches their tires and their body's in the exact same response as when they're in a car crash, purely because the thought and the emotion are tied together and their body goes into the same response. And so then you're just kind of like at the mercy of your own thoughts. And until you actively have the self-awareness to either be selective with observing your thoughts, or you do the work on changing that kind of subconscious wiring of like not having these negative thoughts all the time, which can be hard to do because you get in this little loop, you're in this little hole. And as we said before, it's like if that's all I'm surrounding myself with is just negativity all the time, and then I'm seeing negative shit happen, so then I start to believe that, I'm just the victim and my life sucks and everything bad happens to me, and I'm now believing my own story, then I'm responsible for basically all of the negativity that I'm experiencing. But it's hard to feel that. It's hard to recognize that when you're in it.
And it's hard to accept responsibility.
Yes, of course.
Because shit happens to you, right, or within you. And if you come across as this has happened to me, you know, all of a sudden it's a very victim mentality, and it's hard for a lot of people to say, but it did happen to me. You go, yeah, it did, but it's how you reposition that story that you've taken on board to see what can come next. And I think that's super powerful, you know, because there'll be a lot of people that, whether it's I don't have the money I want yet, and they're, you know, living at home maybe, scratching through every cent, interest rates are fucked at the moment, they're going, how am I going to save a penny, right? And you go, well, what is the mindset and what is the feeling and how do I move and how do I think and how do I talk and what are my friends like? What conversations do I have to make sure that if I was someone that was, let's say, financially well off, what would that person be doing? That takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
That's not something that you do overnight. Reconfiguring your thoughts that you've had for years is something that's not easy at all. And hopefully whoever's heard that, because that's absolute gold. You know, if they're going through a bit of a rough patch or they're wanting to upskill, they're wanting to grow quickly, you know, that's one way you can definitely do it. You speak about working with clients and you talk about a beautiful example around the CEO and looking at your thoughts and choosing the one. When you're having to work through the uncomfortable candidates, what are some of the things that you do to be able to make sure that you can work through it and then push it aside? Because for someone that's in it, it's very hard to just go, yep, off you go, see you later.
A very simple question. Is this true? Doesn't get, like, ask yourself the question, even the example of what you said before, writing it down on paper, like, is this true? Like, is this story that I'm telling myself or this thought that I'm having, is this actually true? Now, did you say, what if it is?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so sometimes, it may be true. And so that's when you have to decide, like you said before, shit is going to happen in your life that is unfavorable. Like, it's not a matter of, like, if, it's literally just a matter of when. Like, there will be certain things happening in life that are unfavorable. And as you said, you got to take responsibility for that, for, like, to a certain degree. And you know, this is easier said than done, but you do have to realize that everything in life is your responsibility as well. And so if something negative happens, or something that is perceived as negative happens, which is a big thing to mention, it's like, it's a perception. It's like, is it negative or does it just feel negative now? Because we don't know. Like, when I look back at all of the negative things that have happened for me, to me, however you want to say it, in my life, they've all ended up being, the majority of them have ended up being some of the best things that have ever happened in time. Not in the moment, but in time they have. And so then you just got to decide. It's like, okay, this has happened. It's not that we need to suppress the negative feeling and pretend like we're not upset, hurt, whatever it may be, but it's like, feel the emotion. I know it sounds a bit stupid, but, like, labeling the emotion of what this actually feels like is really important too. It's just like, all right, I feel sad, or I feel hurt at the moment, or I feel disrespected, or whatever it is. And then figuring out, okay, well, I can either stay in this sadness and I can start to, you know, create and manifest more of this for myself and just stay in it, or I can choose what I do next and, like, how I process this, or how I work my way out of this, or what feeling I want to choose next. Which doesn't mean you're going to go from this super low frequency, low point to just being all the way up here again, just instantly. But again, like, what we focus on is typically what we experience more of, right? So even on a lesser degree of, like, kind of like what you're maybe asking now, coming back to the example of an athlete, I get them to do a similar process to what you mentioned with the journal. It's like, after a game, if they're, you know, stewing on a few negative, like, shit things they did in a game, or outcomes they're unhappy with, or things that they feel like they could have done better, and you know, maybe some feedback they got from a coach or a fan online or whatever it may be, literally sit down before bed and just grab out your journal and go, okay, what are the things that I'm just continuing to overthink at the moment? What are these negative things, these stories that I keep telling myself, and what are the things that I'm unhappy with? And physically write them down. Fold the paper, put it in a shoebox, put the shoebox away, and just acknowledge them. And I think it's always important, as I said, whether it's asking yourself if it's true, and if it is true, what do I need to do now? Because it's like, again, as you said, like, everyone, like, people will experience negative things or things that are unfavorable, and it is your responsibility to choose what you do next. So, like, where do I kind of go from here? Like it is up to you whether or not you stay in it or whether you get out of it. At the same time, I think that's where it becomes increasingly important to be surrounded with good people and have a support network and have someone you can talk to, this, that, and the other, to help yourself get out of it, and not just kind of go into,
solo.
Yeah.
No, yeah.
Like literally the cliche, like it's okay to talk to someone and to tell and speak up and have the conversation with someone else. As you would know, like, and as everyone would know, sometimes just literally saying it out loud, how you're feeling, makes you feel 10 times better than what you did before. It's literally just sitting there. No one even has to give you a solution. Just, mate, this is what I've just been through. This is how I feel. Just wanted to talk to you about it. I just wanted to get it out. And a lot of the time that is very therapeutic and actually helps a lot.
One thing that I found that helped me was like, so when I help clients with rehab in my job as a podiatrist, I tell them the do's, so the rehab, like what they're meant to do. So let's say in the example of mindset, you should journal, write down your feelings and emotions, cross out what's not favorable, and all these things, they're good things to do, right? But then I also say, what are the don'ts, right? Because a lot of people, when they get given ankle rehab, let's say you've had an ankle recode like you did, they don't get told what not to do.
Yeah.
Right? They just say, you need to do these TheraBand exercises, you need to do these calf raises, you need to do this. But they say, you're not allowed to wear these type of shoes.
Yeah.
Or you're not allowed to walk up this type of incline or flight of steps or whatever it is. I guess one of the biggest things is that in the world and the age of social media, and we're both on it now, there's a wonderful saying where comparison is the thief of happiness.
Yeah.
And one of the big don'ts is around your digital environment and knowing what not to follow. Have you worked on that with yourself now, going into obviously being quite social online, to keep an optimum mindset? Do you really work on who you follow digitally, and what does that look like for you in terms of this scope of work you're doing now?
To an extent, yes. Like I would say that I don't intentionally follow any accounts that are negative, I guess, in a sense, or a thing that I'm really not a fan of, particularly in the health and fitness industry, is tearing other people down to bring yourself up, which happens a lot in the health and fitness industry, unfortunately. It's like, instead of promoting and talking about what you believe in and what you think is going to help people and add value, you spend all your time shaming someone else for their opinion or their approach, which you don't believe in, which I'm just totally against. I'm not totally against it. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. It's like, what value is this adding to anyone? So I go out of my way to not interact or even follow any shit like that. But at the same time, I just don't really consume much. Like if I went on to like the amount of people I'm following at the moment, I could spend a couple of hours going through and just fucking unfollowing a shitload of people. But it's more so just the fact that I use social media to go on, put my stuff on there, get my content out, and I just don't really scroll through other people's stuff. Like I just don't sit there and go through other people's posts and stuff. Like maybe the first few stories at the top of the page, I'll like tap on a few stories, or if there's a page that I genuinely get value out of, I'll go search the name of the page and just look what they've posted recently. But outside of that, like I'm quite intentional about content that I am consuming. So whether that be podcasts, audiobooks, I spend in my free, like if I've got time off, I like watching YouTube stuff. Like I'll go in and find interviews or content on certain different ideas, whatever. But at the same time, like as I mentioned before, I love shit like stand-up comedy too. So there'll be times where I just want to watch something that just makes me feel good, like that I enjoy. And I think that is that's an important thing too, is that, as I've mentioned a few times, like if we are intentional about what we focus on, we'll experience more of it. And to get to that high frequency, it doesn't have to be like an ice bath or a meditation or fucking a one-on-one mentoring session. It can just be taking the dog for a walk if that makes you feel good, watching comedy, or having a coffee with your missus or your partner or whatever. If it makes you feel good, you are so much more likely to then gravitate towards the next good feeling thing. And so I've found with work in particular, like if I'm working on a new project or whatever and I'm struggling to figure out like what the fuck I need to do next, or I'm stuck on something, instead of just sitting there trying to force the outcome, I'll go and do something that has nothing to do with anything, and just with the intention of feeling good, knowing that once I feel good, I'll be so much more likely to then gravitate towards the next thing that is actually going to help in that situation. So I would say that I'm intentional with what content I consume. I try to be as much as possible anyway.
It was interesting that you said about, what's the challenge or what you're moving towards. I wrote it down here. There was an interesting conversation you had with Lachlan Stewart around building better men. And there was a quote in that interview. You said, "You're only capable of what you've been exposed to." What haven't you been exposed to?
What haven't I been exposed to? A lot. Right?
That relates to what that relates good English to the direction you're wanting to go into.
I think there's obviously still lots within like the mindset, personal development space that I haven't been introduced to yet. I think from a business perspective, I have been exposed to a lot of like higher level stuff, whether it be from an operational standpoint or whether it be from financial, but I still think a lot of it is not normalized yet, as in like it's becoming more normal to think and talk about even certain figures in business and stuff. But I think for me, it's just about continuing to reach further and further and further. And so that just requires you to get uncomfortable. It's like if I'm starting to feel comfortable with like certain things within the business or within finances or within personal development, relationships, whatever it is, it's like, how can I get back to feeling a bit uncomfortable again? Because I'm not, whatever I'm experiencing is not normalized. And so I can't really pinpoint what that would be as such in terms of what I haven't been exposed to yet.
Is there something that you'd like
something,
to be?
actually, no. Something comes to the top of my mind straight away. Not straight away, obviously, but after a few minutes. It's not necessarily anything to do with work, but I haven't been exposed to what it's like to be a parent. And it's something that I really want to do quite soon. Yeah. And my partner and I, we both do, but it's something that I'm really looking forward to. And so I've been exposed to it from the sense of working with a lot of people who have kids and run businesses and take care of themselves physically and mentally and all the rest of it. But that will be like a new chapter that I'm excited to dive into. And so I'm trying to, I want to be well equipped, as in like, not trying to figure out how to be, the best parent or whatever, but more so like, I just want to make sure that I'm intentional about how things would look when that does happen, to make sure that I can continue to stay on the trajectory of what I am with like business and physically and all the rest of it as well. And as I've said before, a lot of the stuff that I do in business is just documenting and sharing my experiences of what I've done. And so I want to be able to go through that experience and document and share how we can not use that as an excuse to drop off on business, but at the same time be a really good fucking parent and be there, and physically obviously a big one as well, like not having to have a dad bod just because you've got a kid. It's like you can still take care of yourself, all the rest of it. But I haven't been exposed to that yet, but I want to.
That's awesome, man. I feel like this conversation's been like a masterclass in mindset. I'm sure there'll be a lot of people that have listened to you talk now that have gone, holy shit, who is this guy, if they haven't already heard of your name before. Your podcast is called the Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast, I believe. Mm-hmm. And you obviously have channels that people can reach you through. For my audience that listens to this, where can they find you and how can they contact you so that they can, learn a little bit more about you?
Yeah. The Fitness and Lifestyle Podcast. Otherwise, just check out DJK Fitness on Instagram and you'll find the rest of the stuff there. It's all kind of linked up there. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on, man. I've really enjoyed the conversation too. I love, as you know, like I just love talking about this type of stuff. I find it so easy in a sense, like it just easy flows. And similar to what I said about the book, it's like it lights me up to talk about this type of stuff. And yeah, hopefully like someone who listens or watches can take some value from it. And similar to how you and I felt when we read the book, whether it's a podcast, a book, whatever it may be. I think that's all it takes is just that one moment, whether it's a sentence in a book, whether it's hearing something on a podcast that just sparks some form of interest or curiosity inside of you, and then it's time to do the work.
That's awesome. Thanks, great man. Appreciate it.
Thank you, mate. Appreciate it.
Good stuff.